Hello, welcome back to the Powernomics.com YouTube channel. I'm Dr. Claude Anderson, your host, to talk to you about how to connect the dots in race matters and typical events that's going on in our society. I'm sorry that I've been away for a little while because I've been sick. This year's been a year of many health challenges for me, but I survived them and I'm back. So let me say welcome back to you after the holiday, the Thanksgiving holiday, for the old subscribers, and welcome the new ones. And while I was away this past weekend, Dr. Boris Walken called and asked me. He said, "Dr. Anderson, do you mind coming on to my channel during the Thanksgiving holiday? And I want you to think about something and give me some answers about it." I said, "What's that, Dr. Watkins?" He says, "About Thanksgiving itself. What is the history of it? What was the origin of it? And what's the importance of it? And all this about turkeys and pilgrims and are there anything significant about Thanksgiving for Black folk?" And I said, "Yes, Dr. Watkins, I'll be glad to answer that for you." And I'll try to give you some explanation on it and history on it as quickly as I can. Now I'm going to be running through today about 60 miles an hour to try to get through this and answer that question for him, because you see that's a very good question that he asked. And but I've said over and over again in oral presentations and in my discs and DVDs and in my books, Dirty Little Secrets about Black History and Black Heroes, Volume 1 and Volume 2. I put in 1,000 short stories and factoids about unknown things that Black folk have done in this country that most people don't know about. So what I'm going to say to you in trying to answer Dr. Watkins' question is this, as I've said it to him before: there is absolutely nothing that has happened in this country in the last 460 years that Black people did neither directly cause or were indirectly involved in. That covers everything. That Hispanics can't say that, Arabs can't say that, American Indians can't say that, and Asians can't say that. But Black folk can say that. Nothing has happened that that Black folk didn't either cause or were not indirectly involved in. So let's try to address Dr. Boris Watkins' question about Thanksgiving. He wants to know what's the history of Thanksgiving and what is the significance of it. Well, let me start at the end of my little presentation right quick and tell you it is significant from the standpoint that it was put in place in about mid 1860s after the Civil War by President Abraham Lincoln. But before I get to that, I'm going to tell you why he came out with a Thanksgiving holiday. That was the origin of the holiday. But let's go back and collect a few dots before we get there. Let's go back now to back to after the race in Europe started, when all the European nations began to say, "Hey, we just got to report back from Columbus. There's some land over in the Americas that is wide open. We can go over there and begin to and see how we can get some of that stuff. If we can sail around there." And that was like in the 1400s. We had a few blacks who came in here with Columbus and also with Vasco and also with Ponce de Leon. But in about 1516, there was a significant number of blacks running around all over America. And that was for two reasons. First of all, because the Folsom people had been in America ever since about 16,000 years ago, and that was 10,000 years ago before the so-called American Indians ever appeared. American Indians were just a combination of a mixture of people, specifically Black people, who had interbred with them from the Folsom people and created a new group of people called Indians. But in about 1416, that's when the first blacks were noted in history. And that's why, and that was 100 years before the Pilgrims supposedly landed at Plymouth Rock in Massachusetts. That they landed here in about 1620, but in 1416, blacks were running around the country. That's why one of the most noted authors in America, Lerone Bennett, who used to be with Jet Magazine, Ebony Magazine, he wrote a magnificent book called Before the Mayflower. Now, the Mayflower was talking about pilgrims coming to America that landed in 1620. But in truth, Black folk had been in this country in a substantial number way before the Pilgrims landed. But anyway, the Pilgrims got credit for landing on the Plymouth Rock and bringing forth what we call the American major holiday of the year called Thanksgiving. And so Pilgrims landed in about 1620. When they landed, there must have been somewhere around maybe about at least over 100 Indian tribes in the country running around. But when they landed, they called themselves Pilgrims. And that's the first thing that I want to tell Dr. Watkins. They landed and they started calling themselves Pilgrims. And the Pilgrims were nothing but really Protestants from the north, from European society. They were like way up in the northern part. They came to America looking for what? Not what you've been told. What you've been told is mostly about Thanksgiving. It's made up of a number of things: fables, myths, lies, and illusions. And when the Pilgrims landed, they didn't come here looking for religious opportunities. They had all the opportunities they wanted in the Netherlands up there to practice Protestant religion, and that's what they were preaching and teaching. When they came here, though, they landed at Plymouth Rock. They called themselves the Pilgrims, which means coming here and trying to begin to get something that they couldn't get in Europe, which is going to be free land and an enrichment from the resources of this nation. And they called themselves Pilgrims for, let's say, maybe about 2 or 3 decades. They would call themselves Pilgrims. But after they got a chance to see all the riches of this nation, the land, the resources, and opportunities, then they changed from calling themselves Pilgrims and started calling themselves colonists. Colonists, which means now that we're here, we no longer call ourselves Pilgrim. Let's start calling ourselves colonists, which means we're gonna lay claim and stake to some of these resources. And based on that, they began to form little collections as colonists and form what they call colonies at that point in time. So they started building colonies, starting in the New England states, coming down the East Coast. And pretty soon after about 100 years, they had 13 colonies running all the way from the north all the way down. They had sort of 13 colonies. And once they got those 13 colonies established, they said, this is ours. And what we need now is that we got to be able to lay claim to this. Let's now build some kind of a social construct that, or some kind of legal document that would explain who we are and what we are and where we are. And so they began to get together, come together, and try to write what's called the United States Constitution. And they wrote that Constitution. They decided, well, we no longer should call ourselves colonists. Let's change the name to Europeans. So at that point, they started calling themselves Europeans. Why? Because one of the first things they did when they built the United States Constitution was set up an immigration law in 1790. They started asking all Europeans to come to America so they can work as a team. So they can say, well, as a team, we're going to come together as Europeans and colonize this continent and try to control all the resources in it. And if necessary, to push the Indians back and take it over. And look at what we got then. We got resources here. Now, how the turkey came in was that at that time, from the 1620s, when the first Pilgrims landed, one of the favorite things they could find for food was wild turkeys. And so they could live off of wild turkeys and corn and a few other things. But even though most of them wound up the first 20 years, most of them starved to death. But wild turkey became very important. So now you got Pilgrims and you got wild turkeys. They were living off of wild turkeys. But when the Constitution was written about 200 years later, most of the wild turkeys had disappeared, and they need to have something else to be able to live off of. So in the Constitution, they began to set up a thing. They set up a slavery system, and black slavery became the substitute for those wild turkeys. And in a different period, they can live off of them. So they said, now we can take these people, we can bring them into this country. We can live off of them and let them provide for us. Let them be our servants. Let them provide our cooking and our fighting, keeping our house. Instead of wild turkeys gone, let's use these sort of way symbolically. This is symbolically now speaking. Black people replaced the wild turkeys in America, and the society then built into the Constitution 2 things. That these Europeans came in, they would come in here as either owners of all these properties and resources in America. That was the first level. And underneath that, they bring in another level of poor whites to be the management class, to manage the resources. That's the land and also these slaves they're going to put into effect across this nation. And so blacks became the laboring class in the Constitution. And it stayed like that with just the Pilgrims. And as they moved forward, the Pilgrims began to disappear in name recognition. The wild turkeys that disappeared, that lasted up until about the 1860s. After the Civil War broke out, across the country, and the country was divided between the North and the South. Then our first terrorists of this nation evolved out of the Southern Confederacy, the Southern states, what now you all call the red states, the redneck states. Those were the first terrorists in America. They tried to attempt to destroy the country, period. And even though nowadays you might still see some of that in 2019, but they're still trying to take over and destroy the country in their second big round. But anyway, they then say, well, now that we are Europeans in this country, we got all these resources now, let's no longer call ourselves immigrants, because now we got these black folk enslaved. Let's get away from that. We got to be able to define ourselves based on the most conspicuous cosmetic identification we have. And what is it? Is it our religion? Is it our education? Or is it our skin color? They decided it would be their skin color. So all of a sudden, in the after the Constitution was crafted, they no longer want to call themselves Europeans. They've gone from pilgrims to colonists to Europeans. Then they say, well, let's call ourselves whites. That is critically important. That's why you hear black folk saying, questioning me, Dr. Evans, why do we call ourselves blacks? Because whites, that is critically important. Whites don't call themselves Europeans anymore. They call themselves white. So they know exactly who they're identifying with. They're not identifying with their country of origin. They don't call themselves Spaniards or French people. They call themselves white in this country. So white became the thing. But after the Civil War, the country had been extremely divided, fighting that war. Now, at this point in time, Lincoln was still the president. Now, he did something that had initially been initiated by George Washington. When George Washington was president, he said, after crafted the Constitution, we should have a national holiday to celebrate the Constitution. And he spoke about it on a number of occasions, but no one ever did anything to establish a national holiday. Not done. But when got to President Lincoln, almost 100 years later, Lincoln said, now that the war is over, the Civil War is over, we got to come together and unite. We got to start practicing ethnocentrism. Ethnocentrism, same thing I talk about in my books, coming together as a group around their whiteness and started promoting it. Now, why? Because Lincoln was saying it's important for us to come together and unite as a team and play as a team. And we need something that would make us an exceptional people in the world, because we're aspiring to be the dominant democratic society on earth. And say we want this country to be known for its exceptionality, for its specialness, and as a democracy. And so then what they did to say, well, what we'll do then, let's have a special day, and we'll call it Thanksgiving. Where every year people go out and do what initially the Pilgrim was trying to do, base it on religion, because it's sort of be Protestant based. And so then they said, let's have a religion, make Thanksgiving based on a religion. And so people come together once a year and celebrate their bounties and their blessings in this country. And they said, now we got that pretty well straight. So we'll keep the image, the illusions of the Pilgrims, and so and all these symbols we've been using throughout history. So that came in, began to come into effect after the Civil War. Then, but that was in about 1865. About 1870, they said, "Oh, gee, let's fix this thing in a systematic way. We need symbols." And so again, they used the Pilgrim as a symbol, so by 1870, the Pilgrim became well established as a symbol for the building of this nation, for its exceptionality and for its bounty and its blessings from God. That became sort of fixed in our society in about 1870. 20 years later, they said we need something else in here to show our origin with the Pilgrims. And they got back and recaptured the image of Indians in 1890. Why? Because in 1890, for the first time, now whites began to put some faith and some recognition for Indians into our national ethos, where Indians became very historically identified with this country. So they put, so in about 1890s, they started saying, well, Indians are now, they are a separate nation, and we've always ignored them and kept them outside the loop, but let's make them a separate nation and call them natives and give them some credit. And so, and also more importantly, they're different from whites, they're different from blacks, and they're above black folk. And so Indians then became very important in our society. They started making carvings and statues about Indians. They started putting Indians on the currency in this country about 1890s to give them some high visibility in a ranking order, which meant white, European, browns, Indians, then blacks at the bottom. And so Indians began to came attached again to pilgrims and this country and the building of Thanksgiving. And that was done then at that point in time to make an official Thanksgiving holiday, which was symbolized by going back, recapturing the pilgrims coming to America and trying to do something special, which they didn't. They didn't come here for religious reasons. They came here to get resources like everybody else. That's why they came into this country, just like the Dutch, the French, the Germans. Everybody was coming to America to get resources. Everybody came here to get resources. They got them, except black folk. What black folk got was a chance to be a resource that would be owned and controlled by everybody, by the white management class. And they had a chance to be able to substitute later on for the turkey. But the turkey then is still built into the symbols of this country. Pilgrims, Indians, and the turkey. And then later on, black folk gave the turkey. Why? Because as everybody else got wealth and resources, they began to build industries and factories and everything else in this country and began to capture wealth and to build wealth. Black folk never got it because the South then, after the Civil War, they got their land back. They say, we still need a labor class. Slavery is over, but we still need some free labor. If we can't get free labor, let's get some cheap labor. And so the North and the South agreed again to ignore blacks in the South, so that the Southern whites could again use blacks and semi-enslave them through Jim Crow segregation, black codes, and control them under peonage laws, where again they would be cheap labor, and again they became the turkeys for this country. Everybody come in this country, every immigrant group come in this country, from any place on the earth, they could come in here and use black folk as a platform for enrichment, and they became like the turkey for Thanksgiving. Now, how did Black Friday come in? Well, after every year, since blacks didn't own any businesses and didn't have any communities, they couldn't make any wealth and resources. And so every year, all the major industries and businesses try to get their maximum sales up following Thanksgiving. And so they began to call that Black Friday or Dark Friday because everybody was making money and getting rich and off the consumers. And the only two things that black folk have been in the history of this nation was to be slaves and to be a big block of slavery or servants, and also a big block of consumers. They are 100% consumers and zero producers because they don't own any resources. That's why Power Numbers keep saying the issue for black folk in America is to own and control resources. That's the primary thing they should do. Don't worry about voting or anything else. Try to go get those resources and start practicing group economics, and by rebuilding your communities, start learning how to build businesses and industries, learn how to produce and get wealth and be able to keep your money in your own community with your own people and make yourself so strong economically that after every Thanksgiving in the future, that whites and other groups be coming to the black community to buy your products, to buy black products, black goods, and leave the money in black communities. So after every Thanksgiving in the future, if we can start learning how to practice these Powernomics principles, we'll start having white Fridays instead of black Fridays. Now, there you is. That's the history. And I've connected the dots for you and for Dr. Watkins on how Thanksgiving came into our society. It's a social illusion of social economics and social politics, and it's a prevailing holiday in American society up to the present time. Thank you, and I got to get off because I got to fix some more DVDs about Q&As that questions you've been sending to me, and also I got to talk about voting. Take care, and I love you. Keep subscribing, hit that like button, and I got to figure out how to make money off these things, which I can't do, and I'm going to start learning how to do it. You all take care. I'll see you on the next video.